everyone. I want to welcome you to the second listening session on the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body to draft and negotiate a WHO convention, agreement, or other international instrument in pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. I'm Jessica Stewart, the Director for Agency Coordination within the Office of Global Affairs at HHS, and I will be your moderator for today. These stakeholder listening sessions are designed to seek input from stakeholders and subject matter experts like you to help inform and prepare for U.S. government engagement with their intergovernmental negotiating body. We set up this meeting in hopes that we would receive your feedback prior to the next meeting of the INB scheduled for July. Each registered stakeholder will have 2 minutes to provide comments. We will alert you to who is speaking and the next 2 people on deck so that you can be prepared. If you cannot speak during your time, including for technical glitches, we will go on to the next speaker and try to call you again at the end of the session. At 2 minutes, if you're not complete, I will unfortunately have to stop you to go on to the next speaker. I really don't prefer doing that, so please keep it to 2 minutes. Note if you will have the opportunity to provide written comments, and those can be as long as you feel necessary, so please use that if you are going to go over the 2 minute time frame. Please ensure your microphone remains on mute until it is your turn to speak. Video is optional, although speakers are encouraged to turn on their cameras while speaking. We will not be using the chat during this session. If you run into difficulties, please email the address you RSVP to. And now to introduce the esteemed panelists who are from the Department of State and Department of Health and Human Services, who work with and represent the full U.S. government during these negotiations. I'm going to turn to Ambassador Hamamoto to introduce herself, and then the other, who is the lead negotiator, and then the other deputy negotiators who are on the call to introduce themselves.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Hello, everybody. I'm Pamela Hamamoto. And as Jessica mentioned, I'm the lead negotiator for the United States in the Pandemic Accord negotiating process. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to start by making just a few comments, and then my deputies, Colin McKiff and Casey Brown, can also introduce themselves. They're joining us today as well. So I wanted to start by reiterating that the United States remains committed to the negotiation of the Global Pandemic Accord that ensures we are all better prepared to confront future pandemics. We intend to continue to help shape the accord over the next year, and ultimately we hope the U.S. can join the agreement. The feedback that you all provide us throughout this process is very important to us. We view the INB process as well as the IHR amendment review, which is also currently underway, as valuable opportunities to strengthen the U.S.'s ability and the world's ability to prepare for and respond to future pandemic threats. The COVID-19 pandemic reinforced that threats to global health require rapid, effective, and sustained international cooperation. By applying the lessons learned from COVID-19 and other outbreak response efforts, we aim to ensure that we are better equipped when another pandemic threatens. These negotiations are an opportunity to build upon more than 20 years of strong bipartisan U.S. leadership in global health, from HIV/AIDS, malaria prevention, and child survival, to the global health security architecture and responses to Ebola and COVID-19. Following our negotiating session in June, the Bureau attempted to synthesize member state input and identify areas of convergence and areas of divergence on key issues. That document is called the Bureau's text, and it's a document member states are currently reacting and responding to. The Bureau's text is not all-inclusive, and thus it does not include all feedback from delegations, non-state actors, and other external stakeholders. There are aspects of this text that we support and other aspects that we do not support, and we are interested in your constructive feedback so that we can factor it into our work. For the United States, we believe the Pandemic Accord should include agreement on action to enable rapid and more equitable response to health emergencies in order to save lives and their acute phases more rapidly and promote swifter economic recovery. Build global health security and pandemic preparedness capacity to prevent, detect, and respond to health emergencies, and build inclusive, adaptive, and resilient health systems. Reduce pandemic threats posed by zoonotic diseases by enhancing multi-sectoral action, including One Health approaches, and decrease zoonotic spillover. Establish sustainable and effective financing, governance, and accountability mechanisms to break cycles of panic and neglect. In order to respond more rapidly and increase equity, we would also like the Accord to provide more clearly defined rules for transparency, disease surveillance, and early response to outbreaks, provide a more comprehensive approach to data and sample sharing to enable faster detection, prevention, and response, and improve equity in access to medical countermeasures, including through strengthened local and regional manufacturing capacities and clearer rules for engagement and coordination. These actions must be done in a way that will not compromise the ability of American citizens to make their own healthcare decisions. The administration will not support any measure at the World Health Organization, including in these negotiations, that in any way undermines or compromises U.S. sovereignty or security. Our priority, first, last, and always, is the protection of the American people and defending the sovereignty of the United States of America. As noted, I am representing the U.S. government in these negotiations, which includes the interests of the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the rest of the Department of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of State and the rest of the Department of State, many other departments and agencies, and the White House, and I'm committed to ensuring that my team and I represent and protect all U.S. equities. Any accord resulting from these negotiations would be designed to increase the transparency and effectiveness of cooperation among nations during global pandemics and would in no way empower the WHO or any other international body to impose or oversee national actions. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on the Bureau's text. Thank you. Jessica, back to you.
Thank you. I want to also introduce Colin McGiff, who's the Deputy Negotiator, and Casey Brown, who is also a Deputy Negotiator, who are on the call and listening in today. As a reminder, we will not be using the chat during this session. And please keep all comments to 2 minutes, and please, as much as possible, be cordial and respectful to those, to others on the call. The first speaker will be Jose from the University of Miami Public Health Policy Lab, followed by Catherine from Pandemic Action Network, followed by Chris from Friends of the Global Fight Against AIDS, TB, and Malaria. Go ahead and turn it over to Jose.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I'm Jose Shapersnik from the University of Miami Public Health Policy Lab, and I'd like to thank Ambassador Yamamoto and her piece for the excellent work that you have been doing in the IND negotiations. We are, however, concerned about the Bureau's text, and I know the ambassador said it's not complete, but it doesn't go far enough in several areas that I'd like to touch on with regard to sovereignty and with regard to the accountability and governance needed to enhance compliance with the agreement. We see the Bureau's text as having taken a step back from the original zero draft in its definition of sovereignty. State sovereign rights to determine and manage their approach to pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response is no longer defined as limited to the extent that activities within countries' jurisdiction or countries' control do not cause damage to other countries. So respectfully, I disagree with the statement that we won't allow any any international body to have oversight over us, because there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility in how we define sovereignty to ensure that no country is able to behave in ways that causes damage to other countries. Sovereign rights cannot go unchecked in the case of pandemics, because pandemics are not limited by country borders and often require collective action for successful mitigation.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for your time, and please do submit written comments. We'd really appreciate them. Next, I have Catherine from the Pandemic Action Network, followed by Chris from Friends of the Global Fight Against AIDS, TB, and Malaria, followed by Leland with no organization given.
Thank you. Ambassador Hamamoto, Colin, Casey, Jessica, and colleagues, on behalf of Pandemic Action Network and our more than 350 partners, thank you for providing the opportunity to input today on the INB. We wish to highlight following issues related to accountability on Article 1, Article 4 and 8, Article 13, Article 19, and Article 20 and 21. Of course, I will memorialize this in writing. Article 1, the definition of a pandemic. We support including severity, not only the speed of spread. We also support the inclusion of regional cooperation as part of a required response, and then the inclusion of gradual warning system. On Articles 4 and 8, we support the expanded text under Option 4B and explicit mention of the IHR monitoring framework and independent assessments. As a subpoint, we urge a bias towards improving existing tools, not creating new ones. Existing tools including the Joint External Evaluations and the Global Health Security Index. On Article 13, we support the establishment of a global pandemic supply chain and logistics network. We hope to see a lower middle income country-led end-to-end ecosystem approach based on collaboration to ensure upstream structural equity and a break with the past failed model based on pooled procurement. On Article 19 related to financing, we urge the text to include an explicit commitment for all member states on 3 points. One is to commit to a full and sustainable financing of the pandemic fund of the full $10.5 billion annually, which is a key mechanism to support countries on IHR implementation before creating a new pandemic fund. Point 2 on finance, commit to a reliable global surge financing mechanism. And 3, we would appreciate clarification that this financing is both additional and sustainable. On Articles 20 and 21, which is the Conference of Parties and Reporting, given the existential and growing threat of pandemics to humanity, we recommend a convening on an annual cadence as well as reporting on an annual cadence. Subpoint 1, we urge accountability that goes beyond ministers of health and resides at the heads of state and head of government. And we also add that simply establishing a third committee at the World Health Assembly will do little to change the status quo in the pandemic cycle of panic and neglect. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Please do submit those in writing. The next person is Chris Collins from the Friends of the Global Fight Against AIDS, TB, and Malaria, followed by Leland Leham, who I did not see on the Zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and give the next 2 people beyond that, which is Christy Miner with no organization given, and then Katie Ashby Coppins from Voice for Freedom, New Zealand.
Good afternoon, and thanks very much for making time to hear community perspectives on this issue. First, I want to thank the administration for its continued leadership on global health, for hosting Global Fund replenishment, and more recently, our interventions to insert really good global health language in the G7 communiques and the high-level meeting texts. The U.S. remains the global leader in reminding the world of the critical importance of continuing to work to end the epidemics of AIDS, TB, and malaria as part of, not separate from, improved pandemic preparedness. And my intervention today is to urge you to continue making that point as the convention is revised. Any global plan on preparedness should recognize both that, 1, working to end the current epidemics is central to meaningful pandemic preparedness in UHC, and two, that the AIDS, TB, and malaria platforms, including the Global Fund, have much to contribute and are actually a pathway to pandemic preparedness. Trying to get ready for the next pandemic without factoring in the potential contributions of current pandemic responses will not make most people safer. When a new disease threat arrives, countries will respond with the health systems they have in place, to which AIDS, TB, and malaria responses the U.S. and the international community has intentionally contributed. Elisha Dunn Gourgeot of Global Health Council and I today have an op-ed in Global Health now on the role of PEPFAR and Global Fund in PPR, and I know we're not using the chat box, but I went ahead and put the link into it anyway. I encourage you to work for language in the convention that recommits to ending the epidemics of AIDS, TB, and malaria as part of preparedness and calls on governments to recognize and build on synergies in AIDS, TB, and malaria programming, including the Global Fund, as part of a holistic approach to preparedness. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please also send that link via the email address that was that you RSVP'd in.
Can do. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I show Christy Miner with no organization given, followed by Katie Ashby Coppins from Voice for Freedom New Zealand, followed by Margarita Reagan with no organization given.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking as a U.S. citizen. The first line of the Bureau's text states that the premise is a catastrophic failure of the international community in achieving solidarity and equity in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The whole foundation with which this document is written is based on a lie. Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of WHO Health Emergency Program, stated during a panel interview on May 22, 2023, while at the World Health Assembly, that the WHO saw health systems in the North brought to their knees. He stated, quote, "I actually saw communities and countries where, if you go to the Mekong and the likes of Thailand and Cambodia, they did okay, they did very well, because they had been investing in community health. Moments later, he stated, we're forgetting this by building very top-heavy medical response systems. We have to get down to communities to build from the bottom up," close quote. In other words, all the countries that were in lockstep following all WHO directives did worse. We need to ask ourselves why WHO is advocating for top-heavy approaches through this document when their own Director of Health Emergency Program is advising the opposite. Moving to general principles and approaches under Article 3 on page 5 of the Bureau's text, I wish to point out three other areas that demonstrate that this charade is designed only to strip us of our rights under the U.S. Constitution. First, under respect for human rights, the focus is on the right to enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health. The text does not recognize the right of the individual to refuse medical treatment or other measures. Each individual must judge their own standards of health, not leave it in the hands of unelected bureaucrats. Second, the general principle of science and evidence is a complete farce. WHO and governments around the world shut down scientific debate during COVID. Science doesn't exist without scientific debate. Finally, under general principle number 12, labeled proportionality, it reads, responding to pandemics should be proportionate, such that the benefits of measures implemented outweigh their costs. Actions speak louder than words. Those of us calling for risk-benefits analysis from the beginning of the failed lockdown strategy were told we were grandma killers and that one death was too many while millions of healthy people fell into poverty and our youth suffered depression and learning loss, which are all killers. There is only one proper response to our government to this document. Reject it immediately and begin the process to fully exit the WHO. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christy. The next speaker will be Katie Ashby Coppins from Voice for Freedom New Zealand, followed by Margarita Reagan with no organization given, followed by Dustin Brace from Interest of Justice.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Office of Global Affairs, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Katie Ashby Coppins. I am Head of Legal for Voices for Freedom New Zealand. I'm also a United States citizen. The WHO is creating a pandemic treaty or accord of what is now accepted was a man-made virus that allowed the world to grind to a halt, destroyed lives and livelihoods of millions, and required people to be vaccinated with an untested and untrialed experimental drug that has caused widely reported injury and death. There have been no efforts made to investigate that man-made virus leak, to hold those responsible accountable, to learn from that release, to impeach those involved for lying, or to condemn, outlaw, or sanction. Where are the court cases, the investigations and decisions equivalent to US v. Brandt, the Nuremberg trial held after the Second World War? Where is the upholding of ethical research principles for human experimentation that were created in that precedential case? The world would have been much safer without virology labs making cocktails out of viruses and supercharging infections in the name of health. Our health officials have failed us. They have failed themselves. They have failed to uphold the Hippocratic oath of first do no harm in favour of the hypocrite's oath to do as I say, not as I do. How can we trust an organisation that purports to be about world health when its only accurate statement the whole pandemic was, I quote, "There are currently no efficacy or safety data for children below the age of 12 years. Until such data are available, individuals below 12 years of age should not be routinely vaccinated." Yet that statement was removed from the WHO's website the very day we launched and heard the High Court case to protect Kiwi kids, and then it was scrubbed from the archived version of the website. The WHO does not stand for health, and it has undermined the trust people once held in it. There is no desire by the WHO to fulfil its duty to hold those accountable for this atrocity so that this does not happen again. Alas, the proposed treaty will favour virological and bacterial labs, protect scientists, search out pathogens which it will dangerously centralise, and allow Big Pharma to flourish further, none of which will benefit your health or mine. Under the pandemic treaty, we will be more at risk of human nature than Mother Nature. I call on all democratic countries that value their sovereignty to resign from the WHO. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie. The next person is Margarita Reagan with no organization given, followed by Dustin Braves from Interest of Justice, followed by James Rogowski with no organization given. Margarita, are you able to come off mute? I'm going to go ahead and skip Margarita. Go ahead.
I'm really sorry. I didn't realize I was on mute. Yeah, sorry. I will start again. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I will be speaking as an individual and as well as on behalf of the many victims of iatrogenic harms of various pharmaceutical products. I oppose to Article 3, Principle 7, and I oppose to Article 3, Principle 8. Article 5, I conclude that it will enable more surveillance, more data collection, lack of privacy, and total control over our lives. Article 6, Preparedness, Readiness, and Resilience, that comes across as more of a gain of function operations. Article 18, Communication and Public Awareness, it talks about combating infodemic, tackling false, misleading, misinformation, disinformation, including through the promotion of international cooperation. As far as many of us are aware, it's very well known now that how actually WHO, mainstream media, together with government and healthcare agencies, suppressed and silenced anyone, including prominent doctors and scientists, who talked about the safe preventative treatments, the dangers of COVID vaccines, the injuries and death which they caused. It was actually them who spread false, misleading, misinformation and disinformation. I do not agree to Article 19 and Article 9. I do not agree to Article 18. And Article 19 talks about financing, and it's a lot of emphasis on financing the pandemics, whereas the money needs to be invested in many other pressing health matters. So I would call for exiting WHO, exiting completely for all the nations, all the countries. It did not prove to be reliable, trustworthy, and we can't expect anything better than that. I do not have any trust. I call for exit.
Thank you, Margarita.
Thank you.
Please submit written comments if you have additional statements. The next person is Dustin Bryce from Interest of Justice, followed by James Rukowski with no organization given, followed by Linda Libowitz. And I'm really sorry. I just want to apologize now. I am not a linguist, and so if I pronounce your name incorrectly, I am very sorry about that. Dustin.
Hello, I'm Dustin Rice, interestofjustice.org, and head of the Oversight Committee. First off, I got to say, this treaty is not even salvageable because it violates international law, including making experiments into health policy, vaccine passports, and financial burdens on third world countries, and so much more, including persecution of so-called misinformation. The WHO and the HHS have zero authority to delegate it to even negotiate this criminal treaty, which violates so many rights and norms. The only thing that is important right now is that there are unanswered criminal charges against the WHO, which HHS and WHO Director General Tedros are ignoring in order to continue illegal relations and continue drafting a void treaty. We expect an answer from you. This is criminal charges we informed you of in May 2022 and again in May 2023, which are still answered by both Tedros and HHS. HHS is clearly aiding the WHO pre-qualification program to commit crimes using biological agents, causing undue experimentation. Those are crimes that WHO and HHS refuse to answer to. It appears that HHS wants to make these crimes into some kind of international norm through treaty, through the WHO in treaty. Our organization has a mission, and it is our job to prevent corruption. And for that reason, we forbid you to continue any relations with the WHO, including the treaty. There are far more important things to attend to than making a void treaty, such as answering our serious criminal charges. We are very frustrated that WHO and HHS ignore our very serious criminal charges and continue doing void, corrupt acts against human rights. It means you are forcing us to sue and sue the WHO to prevent your corruption and void treaty that would strip many rights from the people. What if that we are right? What if they are right that there's a serious legal problem with the treaty and the entire relations with the WHO, which is criminal? There are hundreds of pages on your desk proving that many crimes and many unanswered emails asking for responses. Shouldn't the HHS answer us first in case we are right that the WHO and HHS engaging in serious human rights violation in the WHO pre-qualification program and negotiating this treaty? If you all continue to ignore us in our criminal charges, be aware that our organization will be forced to sue all of you in your individual and official capacities.
Thank you, Dustin, for your comments. Please submit additional please submit anything additional in written comments.
Thank you.
Next, I have James Rakowski, followed by Linda Libowitz, followed by Diane Thiel. James?
Hopefully you can hear me. My name is James Rakowski, and I speak for myself. It's obvious that the Bureau's text is not the result of a member nation-led process because the edited down bureaucracy's text is hiding the true intent of the original compilation text, which is being kept secret. You are asking us to comment on something that we are not allowed to see. It's obvious that the bureaucracy's text is really a venture capital investment prospectus designed to pump tens of billions of dollars annually into the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex under the guise of equity. It's obvious that any discussion of a worldwide WHO laboratory network, a pathogen access and benefits sharing system, a logistics network, and the sharing of intellectual property are clearly international trade issues that belong under the purview of the World Trade Organization, not the WHO. You are the wrong people in the wrong place doing the wrong thing for all the wrong reasons. It's obvious that the bureaucracy's text is not a treaty or an accord. Please stop calling it that. It is a framework convention that is filled with conflicts of interest that would set up a cabal of unknown, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who would be given seats at the table with the conference of the parties and then be able to implement detailed protocols that we the people would have no way to stop. It's obvious that the bureaucracy's text is not designed to improve health, but to implement the One Health approach in order to constantly search for so-called pathogens with pandemic potential that could be used to fearmonger and control the population while censoring the truth. And finally, it's obvious that these listening sessions are a thinly veiled charade because you have ignored the 33,884 public comments submitted in April of 2022, as well as the hundreds of videos submitted last September in which we clearly expressed our demands. Stop these negotiations immediately and defund and exit the WHO.
Via written comments. Next, I have Linda Libowitz with no organization given. then Diane Thiel with no organization given, then Thomas Debe with no organization given.
Hello, my camera's not working. I hope, hopefully you can hear me. I'm not just a concerned citizen of the United States that felt I had to speak up on this because I find being even just involved in the WHO with the WHO to be of concern since the WHO really botched their response with the pandemic. They due to their association with China, and you know how China's response was very repressive and oppressive in their country, and they're advising the WHO. And they're in bed with the UN and the WEF, which would desire to downgrade the quality of life for all but themselves. So how can you trust them? How can you trust the WHO to do the best thing for us? You can't. You cannot. And various articles were of concern. Somebody mentioned Article 3, which strikes out with full respect for the dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of persons. So therefore, persons like us speaking out right now would have no say once this goes into effect. We would have no less control over our lives. The WHO would be given quite a bit of control over our lives. And then there's Article 35, the setting up of digital certificates of vaccination. And right now the EU is going to make those kind of things mandatory. It could make it difficult for people like us to do our regular way of life. We could be denied food. We could be denied healthcare. We could be denied all kinds of things under that eventually. Once an organization gets power like that, they never give it back. And then there's Article 44, countering the dissemination of false and unreliable information about public health events, preventative, et cetera, et cetera. And you know how well that went with the censorship of so-called disinformation, and even the doctor who had created the mRNA vaccines, who spoke out against it.
Thank you, Linda, for your comments. Please submit additional comments via the written process.
Okay.
Next, I have Diane Thiel with no organization given, followed by Thomas Debe with no organization, followed by Karen Vogue with no organization given.
My name is Diane Thiel, and I speak for myself. Chapter 1, Article 3, General Principles and Approaches. The phrase, respect for dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of persons is too vague for a document that, if approved, will give considerable power to WHO countries and corporations. To limit these powers, Article 3 needs a detailed bill of health-related human rights. If we learned anything from COVID, this bill must include 1. Inalienable human rights shall not be suspended because of a real or potential pandemic. 2. Inalienable human rights have precedence over the rights and powers of international bodies, regional, state, and local governments, nonprofits, and corporations. 3. The people have the right to choose their own health testing and treatment or to refuse any health testing or treatments. 4. Persons have the right to privacy for their health information. 5. Health passports shall not be required or used to limit the rights and privacy of persons. 6. There shall not be discrimination against persons due to their own health care decisions. 7. Freedom of speech. All persons have a right to form, hold, and publicly communicate their own opinions. 8. The WHO states, bureaucrats, pharmacies, hospitals, and doctors do not have the right to deny potentially life-saving generic medications or non-prescription supplements to any person. 9. Persons shall have protection from unsafe drugs, vaccines, and treatments. Liability cannot be legislated or contracted away. And 10. Persons shall have free and timely access to health studies. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Thomas Debe with no organization given, followed by Karen Vogue with no organization, followed by Christine Ristow with no organization given. Thomas?
How's my volume?
You're good.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. In the past decades, we've witnessed the pharmaceutical industry poison Americans with amphetamines and opioids, thanks to profit motives coupled with regulatory capture, shielding these companies from accountability with increasing demand. These same entities used a similar playbook in 2020 to produce even more wildly profitable results, manufacturing an illness, providing profitable drugs, lobbying to get those drugs approved, then mandated, using allies to run PR and obscuring study results. As of now, peer-reviewed studies show that the mRNA therapeutics called vaccines, which they literally had to change the definition for, had severe adverse reactions, resulting in many deaths. Injury from these products takes years to fully understand, as does gaining standing in court, challenging mandates, and winning deserved compensation for injury. Mandates and false advertising of experimental drugs given without transparency of risks constitute a violation of the Nuremberg Code. The WHO CA Plus is a tool to further this system and creates an investment framework which would only serve to enrich the investors of the WHO, given the numerous conflicts of interest that do and will exist, and will not empower genuine scientific discovery nor public health. Digital health certificates will grease the rails for such a system and such a system that may lobby to force the use of drugs the investing companies desire. This document states any reservations of guidance cannot be incompatible with the objectives of the WHO CA+, and that the regulations could be changed by a majority present voting members, with no mention of a quorum, thus allowing only a few members to change, only a few members to vote, trapping opposing parties for 3 years. There's also an opportunity for large companies to become observers, thus gaining insider knowledge of capital flows into pharmaceutical industry contracts, thus giving them an unethical market advantage. Furthermore, the WHO data collection will be a privacy and human rights violation. Given all of this, we must exit the WHO and stop the drain on our economy, which continues to centralize authority and those that stand to profit, putting the stakeholders before the good of the people. Thank you.
Additional comments via written comments. We really appreciate it. Sorry. The next speaker will be Karen Vogue with no organization given, followed by Christine Ristow with no organization given, followed by Michael Briskin with no organization given. Karen?
Yeah, I had written comments, but I think I'm going to go off the cuff now. I really have a lot of reservations about this, the WHO now as a result of their actions during the pandemic. I don't trust them at all. I felt that people were being censored and that interests in big pharma and manufacturers and special interests took precedence over people's health. And it has been shown that people in developing countries that didn't follow the WHO's directives did better than people in industrialized countries. So I feel that they should not be rewarded with more power and more bureaucracy and more money, and that it should be investigated and streamlined, and that people should have be able to make their own health decisions. And I think that the WHO should be investigated for conflicts of interest and special interests, because what I see when I read that the Bureau text, it seems that it would benefit the bureaucracy. There's a lot of money going into the WHO, and that I feel that Big Pharma are just rubbing their hands at the possibility to have all these labs and manufacturing facilities all over the world, and that does concern me. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
The next speaker is Christine Ristow from no organization given, Michael Briskin with no organization given, followed by Kathleen Jean Kinsley with no organization given.
You can hear me okay? Okay.
I'm opposed to the treaty. I agree with exiting the WHO. I don't think the health decisions of the world should be in the hands of unelected billionaires who profit from the same regulations imposed by them. The WHO has morphed into an organization that cares less about health and more about power and intends to use vaccination status as a method of control, acting as if the COVID shot prevented transmission and further pushing a false narrative that has hurt this world immensely. The jab was sold to us as an effective and safe vaccine, even as the creators acknowledged it was gene therapy. So where was the WHO when this was mislabeled and PCR tests were miscycled? They contributed to both the confusion and the deception and have no place managing pandemics with their track record so far. Why did the WHO allow some countries to demonize proven medications like ivermectin while not acknowledging other countries' successful use of it, or individuals who chose to honor their natural immunity and are not sick and dying as they were told they would be? Critical thinkers know that allowing the safe and effective drug would negate the need for the emergency use authorization of the gene therapy and therefore mandates. But government-controlled media keeps these truths from the average person who trusts blindly. Even as U.S. patents allowed us to discover mRNA's origin as a bioweapon, a large minority group were coerced and threatened to accept this biological experiment that went directly against their religious or medical views, and yet in this age of inclusivity, this minority group was ostracized, criticized, and many lost their jobs, their health, and their lives, all under the supervision of the WHO, among other corrupt organizations. If they truly cared for health, their focus would be on both physical and mental health, using existing safe drugs and natural healing methods, accepting and respecting natural immunity and the dignity and sovereignty of all people, not just those willing to comply without question. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Next, I have Michael Briskin with an organization given, followed by Kathleen Jean Heinelski. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, with an organization given, followed by Kiki from Global Health Council.
All right, I'm Mike Briskin, and I speak for myself. And before I go into my prepared statement, I'd just like to point out that I've been listening, and virtually all appear to be fully against this. And I appreciate that. I'm going to thank our public servants in advance for heeding that. First off, negotiating a new multilateral accord in less than 3 years is highly unusual. Second, considering that during the second INB session, Tedros himself stated that the IHR revisions will strengthen the accord, it's inadequate to talk about one without the other. There's no reason to use WHO and member state resources to negotiate two instruments on the same subject matter, except for an attempt to obscure the ramifications overall. Normalizing digital health passes, lowering the bar for emergencies, all of that is relevant. Nonetheless, from the Bureau's text alone, it's clear we're being set up for a turnkey pandemic industry, from a global surveillance state of hyperactive sequencing and consequent rush tests, to moving high-security lab work and drug trials to states with even more corruptible medical systems under the mantra of equity, to making pharma an inbuilt CA plus contributor, to mandating germ game tabletop exercises like Event 201 to condition and normalize egregious overreach. This is all under the regime of Tedros Ghebreyesus, who covered up multiple cholera epidemics according to the Washington Post, personally led the kidnapping of prominent dissidents according to the Ethiopian registrar, appointed Mugabe goodwill ambassador, fired no senior managers over the largest sex abuse scandal in WHO history, praised China's transparency while they told us nothing, and their measures while they welded people shut in their apartments. This is a travesty. This, like the WHO logo, is the snake of pharmakia surmounting the world. But the WHO gambit is just a symptom. The root cause is a lack of fear of God and a contempt for those of us considered the least of these, which is the same thing. If you're still laboring under the delusion, human subsystems of reality are smarter than the systematization thereof, I recommend the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, or CTMU, by Chris Langan. I'll recommend it till I'm blue in the face. But while I'm rooting for you, it's not up to me whether or not you find the truth. Either way, my promise is this. We will win. And if you proceed in selling us up the river, the only thing in your future is shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next, I have Kathleen, with no organization given, followed by Kiki from Global Health Council, followed by Peter from Public Citizen.
Hello, my name is Kathleen Hinesley, and I'm speaking as a private U.S. citizen. I'm not affiliated with any company, group, or organization. Unlike the WHO, which receives much of its funding from organizations with a financial interest in vaccines. Imagine living in a world in which a single entity exerts control over what you may or may not put into your body, the food you eat, and even chemicals in the air you breathe. Now imagine that this entity is subject to the whims of private companies for whom profit is the primary motive. This is what the World Health Organization wishes to become through the passage of a global pandemic accord. If you personally received any COVID-19 shots, there's a strong chance that you possess wireless technology within your body that is affiliated with a MAC address or addresses that can be read with a simple Bluetooth detection app. It is also likely that you are hosting nanotechnology capable of self-assembling circuit board-like objects within your bloodstream. Patents indicate that some of these products may be used for surveillance and control, perhaps even mind control. So as you listen to me and your thoughts about what I'm saying, you need to really ask yourself, who or what is motivating your decision-making process? Fight to make sure that is you. Your job may provide income for you, but it will not protect you from what the world could become. As a microscopy researcher, I can tell you that some of the technology present in COVID-19 shots is now also present in other vaccines, many dental anesthetics, saline solutions, and an untold number of other products brought to us by the pharmaceutical industry. The use of gene therapy and nanotechnology products in people and animals could be greatly expanded if a global accord like this is passed. These products have already resulted in untold numbers of deaths worldwide. For example, Article 5, Option 5A, 7C of the draft of the WHO's C+ document encourages the promotion of new vaccines in human and animal sectors. Please act in your own long-term self-interest. Do everything you can to help the United States exit the World Health Organization. Other countries will follow. Let's save the world.
Thank you. Next, I have Kiki from Global Health Council, followed by Peter from Public Citizen, followed by Samantha from AVAC.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Thank you for hosting this listening session and for the opportunity to provide input on the work of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body. Global Health Council is a coalition of more than 120 member organizations devoted to advancing global health priorities and improving health and well-being worldwide. We strongly support the ongoing pandemic instrument negotiations and their efforts to build a more comprehensive global health architecture that is better prepared to prepare for, and respond to emerging health threats. These negotiations must be inclusive, transparent, and efficient, and must continue to find ways to for a successful outcome. With input from a range of our diverse members, we plan to share our written article-by-article comments with the U.S. negotiating team, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to summarize our input during this session. We are concerned that there's quite a bit of language that has been weakened in the Bureau's text compared to the Zero draft, including specific language on equity and human rights, norms on equity, including waivers, technology transfer, and regional hubs are weakened, as well as conditions on publicly funded R&D. There's also softer language on liability and tech transfer. Notably, it's our belief that scientific sharing can't be optional, and neither can robust equity. There's also weaker language on financing and trade restrictions, and overall weaker language all around, with more than 40 appearances of as appropriate, which we feel is not strong enough for the stakes at hand, and reliance on information transparency, experts, and softer norms seems to be prevalent, which COVID proved doesn't work in times of crises. It's clear that the divide remains between high-income countries and low and middle-income countries on the pathogen and benefit sharing topics, and there is still missing robust language on accountability and compliance. Lastly, as multiple ongoing negotiations are taking place, it's critical for there to be clearer cohesion, connection, and complementarity between the pandemic accord negotiations alongside the work of the WGIHR and the political declaration for the upcoming high-level meeting on PPPR. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiki. Please do submit your comments via the written process. Next, I have Peter from Public Citizen, followed by Samantha from AVAC, followed by Philip Knoll from Global Health Technologies Coalition.
Thanks very much, Jessica. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, HHS. Public Citizen is a consumer group with 500,000 members and supporters nationally, and we deeply appreciate U.S. leadership in global pandemic preparedness and response. It speaks well of this administration, and that spirit of cooperation represents the best of our country, and it is brave in light of the attacks we face. So thank you so much. We also appreciate, as mentioned last week, U.S. efforts to ensure coordination and complementarity between the IHR and INB processes for maximum efficacy. Very quickly, Article 11, we're very glad to see these ideas included. We support 11A, it's more open and proactive multilateral environment on intellectual property. On Article 12, we support benefit sharing, as mentioned in the IHR process. I mean, just to say that the danger of not including benefit sharing is that the agreement starts to look a little bit like surveilling the South without the spirit of partnership that the pandemic experience has recommended. So urging continued creativity in that area, find ways to support benefit sharing. Would like to point to Knowledge Ecology International's proposal as one approach forward. But mostly I want to talk about Article 9 and brief on research and development and upstream access. Edits from the zero draft have changed binding access commitments into publication and transparency commitments. Just to note that upstream access is one of the most important opportunities we have to really ensure equitable access to products. It treats everyone equally. It's not taking IP, for example, from anyone. It's all about what we're doing with taxpayer-funded medical tools and ensuring broad public access to them. So, in our view, it doesn't cross any U.S. government prior red lines to be very creative in looking at ways to share and commit to sharing that technology or ensure fair pricing of publicly funded technology. We can recognize the U.S. policy in this area still is changing. The Senate Health Committee has called for a bold stand on the reasonable pricing of publicly funded medical tools. The U.S. government, of course, President Biden licensed NIH-funded technologies to the World Health Organization. So U.S. policy is still moving, and we can move. I sense that Jessica is going to ask me to wrap up. So let me just say, CEPI called for U.S. government to be very proactive in this area the other day. CEPI, of course, is not a radical global actor. So I recognize you're constrained, but can we put into the agreement something beyond publication and transparency requirement and at least sort of drive home the values and norm, the expectation of fair pricing and sharing and licensing of publicly funded medical tools? It seems like Article 9 is an area where we can be more creative. Thank you.
Please do submit these via written comments. We'd like to hear that additional information from you as you were cut off. And I'm sorry. Samantha from AVAC, followed by Philip from Global Health Technologies Coalition, Claire from Knowledge Ecology International.
Thank you. I also support the comments made just before me. We are pleased at the inclusion of an outline of terms that should be made public in publicly funded R&D agreements, though this is weakened by the removal of binding measures for publicly funded research. We are particularly concerned about the proposed changes to Articles 11 and 12. The option 11B without option A for 5E is a significant downgrade from the article presented in the zero draft. It is essential that member states agree now to build global research capacity through technology transfer and incentivizing continuous R&D of pandemic tools. And option 11B gives an out on this with the insertion of voluntary and urge to throughout and the removal of commit at the beginning. Full use of the flexibilities offered by the TRIPS agreement must be applied in the event of a pandemic, as it is unreasonable to expect all countries to develop an effective countermeasure at the same time, and unacceptable to expect countries to wait at the back of the queue for those with higher budgets that can afford advanced purchase agreements to finish buying up available stock. We urge the U.S. to support option 11A. The added options for the pathogen access and benefit sharing system in Article 12 are also unacceptable. Option 12A does not contain any of the necessary detail to ensure that the system results in equitable access to countermeasures and throws out vague notions of a possible agreement at some point. This option would be a failure. Of option 12B, option 6CY is a step backward. We have seen that the systems of benefit sharing that rely on donations do not work, as by the time the donations arrive at their destination, the emergency has long passed. Option 12B with option 6CX is the best of the available options, though we note again that the 20% proposed allocation is insufficient and that the emergency allocation should be based on need. If the largest outbreak is occurring in country X, while outbreaks have not taken hold in other parts of the world, priority allocation should go there until supply catches up. It is a raw deal for countries who share pathogen information to not receive the fruits of that labor. Lastly, AVAC has been significantly involved with ongoing discussions on the development of the medical countermeasures platform, and we understand that member states are looking to see the platform's scope, structure, and governance negotiated through the INB process. We urge the U.S. participate in these discussions and call for A, the most extensive and open consultation now when designs are being proposed rather than later when decisions have been whittled out to ensure the most diverse perspectives and that the platform meets the needs of that it will serve, and B, that the platform not rely on acting as a model but
So much, Samantha. Please do submit your comments via the written platform. Next, I have Philip from Global Health Technologies Coalition, followed by Claire from Knowledge Ecology International, followed by Dilaram from RTI International.
Thank you, Ambassador Hamamoto and Colin and other U.S. colleagues for this opportunity. My comments will focus on R&D. First, we call on the United States to consider explicit language in the draft that highlights the need for interconnectedness between health system strengthening and pandemic preparedness and includes provisions that underscore the need to focus on sustainability and dual use when it comes to research and development. We know that Article 9 currently does not cover incentivizing continuous research to develop vaccines, diagnostics, therapeutics, and other health technologies for diseases that cause outbreaks primarily in lower and middle income countries, such as Ebola and Marburg. Continuous research can accelerate the development of medical countermeasures for novel pathogens, as was the case when research on the mRNA vaccine for HIV helped to speed up the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. A provision should be added for supporting such research. Article 9 also outlines important principles of an effective and equitable system for developing the research base needed to accelerate the production of pandemic preparedness countermeasures. However, the latest draft does not currently include provisions for accountability of these principles. As an example, there should be an explicit reference to the inclusion of underserved populations in all their diversity in clinical trials, including children and people who are pregnant or of childbearing age. GHCC would also appreciate more clarity on whether the newly proposed medical countermeasures platform could eventually fit into this space. Lastly, we also urge the United States to support provisions strengthening the capacity of regional regulatory bodies like the newly formed African Medicines Agency. Investing in the regulatory capacity and not just harmonization of these regional bodies will help fill gaps for countries with lower regulatory maturity levels. There is a need to include text that establishes national and regional policies or protocols for the regulation of products during health emergencies. Currently, the draft only highlights general regulatory harmonization and focuses on the licensing of pandemic products without taking into account broader elements of the regulatory ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Next, we have Claire from Knowledge Ecology International, followed by Dilaram from RTI International, followed by Damon Tompkins with no organization given.
As the United States continues to engage in the intergovernmental negotiating body to draft and negotiate a WHO convention, agreement, or other international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, we urge you to keep transparency at the top of your priorities. This includes seeking treaty terms that promote transparency as well as transparency of the negotiation process. Knowledge Ecology International strongly supports option 13A 2 bis D on transparency in Article 13 of the Bureau text. The agreements should include key obligations and incentives related to transparency. Obligations should include, in the terms and conditions of government-funded R&D, a pathway to share intellectual property rights and know-how when qualifying circumstances arise. This could be carried out as a public good or through a pooling mechanism on a share and share-alike basis. The agreement should also obligate member states to fully implement WHA 72.8, the 2019 WHO Resolution on Transparency, which I'll add HHS hardly endorsed at the time of adoption. Concerning transparency initiatives, the agreement should incentivize countries to openly share pathogens and their sequences, as well as the inventions, data, cell lines, and manufacturing know-how necessary to develop and make countermeasures. KEI greatly appreciates HHS holding listening sessions such as this, and OGA has been helpful and receptive in this process. However, KEI also urges the organization of further engagement opportunities for public Q&A, it's critical that the negotiation process has greater transparency and that the draft treaty texts are regularly released publicly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Dillaram from RTI International, followed by Damon Tompkins with No Organization Given, followed by Katarina Lindley from COO Global COVID Summit. I did not see Katarina on the list, so I'm going to give the next person, which is Joan Forrest Mage from None Given. Dillaram?
Am I supposed to speak now?
Nope. Not seeing anyone from Dillaram. The next person is Damon.
Sure. Am I prepared to go?
Yes, please.
Great. So I'm a private citizen, a patriot. I represent only myself, and I'm here to talk about my opposition to this treaty. I generally agree with all the comments that are in opposition to this. And so what I thought I'd do is tell a quick story. I think that it'll seem unrelated at first, but hopefully the point will be made at the end. I am not a public health expert in any way. I am an expert in cybersecurity. I've been participatory in helping matters with intelligence agencies defend our national interest in cybersecurity throughout my career. Approximately 10 or 11 years ago, I found myself on the phone with the National Security Agency in Hawaii, talking to them about encrypting their SharePoint servers. The National Security Agency did not buy my products to encrypt their SharePoint servers. 6 months later, it was revealed by Edward Snowden that the National Security Agency was spying on all American citizens, amongst many other unconstitutional behaviors that were taking place through our intelligence organizations. I will tell you that I wake up probably 2 to 3 times a year, every year since, and I breathe a sigh of relief that I did not participate in helping conceal the criminal actions that took place on those SharePoint servers in Hawaii. So my question to you, for all the people that are participatory in this treaty, you personally are going to wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in a couple of years from now, and you're going to have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, was I participatory in selling all of humanity down the river? Was I the one that was involved in participating in having digital passports to discriminate against people, to back up a transnational corporations and pharmaceutical mafia that has no interest, that has lied about this information from day one and continues to lie through their teeth to this moment? Are you that person? Is that who you are? Because I know that when I wake up in the morning, I thank God I did not make that sale. And I'm glad that America now knows the truth about what their government does unconstitutionally associated with spying with them. So I hope you take that story for what it's worth and decide who you are in all this, because you're going to come to a point of judgment where you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and have to ask yourself who you were in all this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I showed Damon Tompkins sorry, that was Damon. Next, I show Katarina Lindley with Global COVID Summit. I did not see they joined, so I'm going to go on to Joan Forrest Mage, followed by David Brighton with Frontline Health Workers Coalition, followed by Lena from Preventing Pandemics at the Source.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'd like to start off by showing 9 fingers and then 6 fingers. 9 is more than 6. Are we all agreed, right? So that will help you understand my next comments. My name is Joan Forrest Mage, and I am commenting as an individual citizen of the United States, and I say all power to the people and exit the WHO to do that. To start my remarks, I showed you the 9 fingers and the 6 fingers. I am commenting on the amendments to Article 12 of the NIB, which gives one person, the WHO General Director, unprecedented powers to declare a health emergency that can adversely affect every person on the planet. I am against this amendment. As a citizen of the United States, this amendment is everything our U.S. Constitution was written to prevent. Our Constitution was written to prevent rule by a monarch or dictator who has the power to make any orders they want against the will of the people or even their own advisors. We saw a perfect example of this when 1 year ago, when the WHO was deciding whether to declare monkeypox outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. Dr. Tedros, the current WHO General Director, said 9 people on the committee voted against declaring the emergency and 6 people voted for it. He called them again to vote, and again they voted 9 against, 6 for. And he said 9 and 6 is very, very close, but at the same time there was no consensus. I then had to act as a tiebreaker. So here is a person who does not know that 9 is way more than 6. And he's the one that's going to be in charge unilaterally with no committee anymore. It's just whatever he decides. This is everything that our Constitution was written to prevent.
Thank
so,
you. I really appreciate
your
comments. Please submit the rest by via written through the same email that you used previously.
Thank you.
Next, I showed David with Frontline Health Worker Coalition, followed by Lena from Preventing Pandemics at the Source, followed by Neil from Conservation International.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm David Bryden with Frontline Health Workers Coalition. And I want to start out by thanking Ambassador Yamamoto and the whole U.S. team for your work representing the U.S. in these negotiations. On the health workforce, we acknowledge and very much appreciate the new positive and important provisions for the health workforce that have been included in the Bureau text. Article 7 includes new language on addressing the security concerns of the workforce, safety and of the health workforce, priority access to pandemic-related products, issues of violence and intimidation on the health workforce, and the important issue of health workforce planning. We also see some improved language on water and sanitation, as well as infection control and prevention in the optional Article 4B, and we urge adoption of that section. However, we have some concerns about some missing elements and some weakening language considered in the text. First, the text does not address the impact of health worker migration on pandemic preparedness and response, and we urge addition of new language to address that. Second, the text includes options that would weaken commitments in Article 2, items 2 and 5. And the text should go beyond simply encouraging, but rather committing and will support training programs and financial and technical support. On working conditions, the text is a little bit vague. It should go beyond just mentioning conducive environment and specifically reference the WHO Global Health and Care Worker Compact. And finally, Article 15 promotes participation by civil society in decision-making, but it should make specific mention here of including health workers in that decision-making, including the community health workers. I have a number of specific suggestions on the text, which I'll include in the written statement. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Please do submit your written comments. Next, I have Lena from Preventing Pandemics at the Source, followed by Neil from Conservation International, followed by Christine from Wildlife Conservation Society.
Hi, thank you very much first for this opportunity. My name is Lena. I'm representing Preventing Pandemics at the Source, which is a coalition of 20 organizations focused on public health, health justice, animal health, conservation, and indigenous rights. So first of all, we welcome the important inclusions of language on the One Health approach and on addressing the drivers of pathogen spillover from animals to humans in the Bureau's text. There are 3 main articles that include provisions related to One Health and spillover prevention, which are Article 3, 4, and 5. However, we're deeply concerned that in all 3 of these articles, there are 2 options that are provided: an option to retain those provisions related to One Health and spillover prevention, and then a second option to omit those provisions from these articles. In Article 3, Principle 8 on One Health needs to be retained. In Article 4, paragraphs 2, 3, and 6 include important provisions to address the drivers of pathogen spillover, and they also must be retained. Finally, Article 5 as a whole is about strengthening pandemic prevention and preparedness through a One Health approach. This article should be a cornerstone of the Pandemic Accord, yet there's an option for the entire article to be omitted from the text. We argue that it definitely must be retained and must be central to the Pandemic Accord. Research shows, as I said before, that spillover is the root cause of almost all recent pandemics. And the One Health high-level expert panel, which was convened by the WHO, recognizes that spillover prevention is the first step to prevent future pandemics. So it's crucial that the Pandemic Accord includes appropriate provisions on spillover prevention, and that these provisions explicitly state the drivers of zoonotic spillover. So these include land use change, particularly deforestation, commercial wildlife trade and markets, weak animal health systems and management, and also climate change. We recognize that actions to contain outbreaks are important, but we argue that actions to reduce spillover risks are equally important and need to be equally emphasized in the Pandemic Accord. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Neil from Conservation International, followed by Christine from Wildlife Conservation Society, followed by Susan from Environmental Health Advocacy League.
Thanks to our colleagues in the U.S. government for hosting this hearing session. I previously worked for CDC for nearly a decade, and I now work for Conservation International on One Health. I'm also a practicing tuberculosis doctor. I wanted to share some thoughts with regards to pandemic prevention in the WHO Pandemic Accord. As background, I will use the term spillover in my remarks, which refers to the movement of pathogens across species. Most emerging infectious diseases in humans originate from pathogen spillover. I welcome the inclusion of a One Health approach to prevent spillover in early drafts of the Accord. However, concerningly, the Bureau's text that was recently released indicates that there's a possibility that spillover prevention will be excluded from the final Pandemic Accord text. It is imperative that the U.S. government continue to advocate that spillover prevention through a One Health approach be included in the final Pandemic Accord text. Failure to include this will result in the Accord ultimately failing to meet its mandate. Why? Because we know that our current reactive public health model that permissively allows spillovers to happen is fraught with risk and has fatal consequences. Why? Firstly, no public health intervention is perfect, so we can't assume that we're going to be able to contain every future outbreak that occurs after a spillover event. Experience with COVID and Mpox in the last 3 years confirms this. Secondly, we live in an age of rising populism, disinformation, and distrust of public health. So even if we have a future outbreak of some novel pathogen and we are able to rapidly develop a vaccine and therapeutic, there's no guarantee that large segments of the population will choose to take it. Thirdly, secondary prevention and pandemic preparedness do nothing to address spillback. Spillback refers to the movement of zoonotic pathogens from humans back into animals and then into humans again, this time with new mutations that lead to greater pathogenicity. Finally, from an equity perspective, we know that the tools of outbreak containment often reach the disadvantaged last. In contrast, spillover prevention benefits everyone, particularly people in the most resource-limited settings of the world. My colleagues in the Preventing Pandemics at the Source Coalition, as you just heard, have issued recommendations on how this pandemic accord can address spillover prevention. I will share those remarks through my written submission. And a final comment, it's not a zero-sum game. More attention to spillover prevention will not detract from other important aspects of the accord.
I really appreciate your comments. Please submit any additional comments via the email box that you RSVP'd for. Next, I have Christine from Wildlife Conservation Society, Susan from Environmental Health Advocacy League, followed by Arnold Gore from No Organization Given.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this listening session. The Wildlife Conservation Society has been engaged in the IMB process since it launched in 2021, actively advocating for the inclusion of strong language on prevention, particularly pandemic prevention at source. Thus, we are glad to see the standalone article on pandemic prevention and public health surveillance, as well as One Health featured as both a guiding principle and approach and in a standalone article. As we continue to navigate the current pandemic, it has become clear that future global health crises will likely arise from human contact with the natural world. Considering this, it is crucial that the United States work closely with other member states, experts, and organizations with key expertise to integrate a comprehensive One Health framework into the WHO CA+. Thus, we strongly support Article 3, Option 8A, which retains One Health as a guiding principle and approach. We also appreciate Article 5 and support the text with amendments in Option 5A. However, we are flexible on whether the text remains in a standalone article or is incorporated into other relevant sections of the document. Moreover, WCS recommends including language on One Health and integrated One Health action plans in Article 4, paragraphs 1 and 2. As mentioned, WCS supports the text in Article 5, Option 5A with amendments. While the concept of strengthening pandemic prevention and preparedness through a One Health approach in the WHO CA+ is good, it is critical to recognize that One Health is a comprehensive, systems-based approach that encompasses public health and specific sub-entities like addressing antimicrobial resistance, rather than the other way around. A more comprehensive and coordinated approach than is currently outlined in the Bureau's text is needed to mitigate future risks. To this end, we urge national governments and regional bodies to develop and implement comprehensive cross-sectoral One Health strategies, as well as to invest in research and innovation that supports One Health approaches and education and training programs that promote interdisciplinary collaboration and knowledge sharing. We hope that the United States will continue to be a leader on One Health in multilateral fora and actively support the inclusion of legal provisions in the WHO CA+. By working together across sectors and prioritizing the health of humans, animals, and the environment, we can help prevent the next pandemic of zoonotic origin.
Please submit your comments via the written format that you RSVP'd. Next, I have Susan from Environmental Health Advocacy Lead, followed by Arnold Gore from No Organization Given, followed by Cassandra Arbach from Global Walkout USA.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, sorry. As a former Harvard School of Public Health research assistant, a 35-year environmental health professional, I would note that the private opinion consensus amongst public health scientists is that the catastrophic failures of the recent years were based in certain false presumptions. One, a potential for a natural as opposed to man-made pandemic. Two, a solely biological pathogen producing incurable disease as opposed to the extant transbiological, chemical, and electromagnetic hazards. Three, a lack of preventive and curative measures. Four, the validity of a single overarching set of procedures across localities. Five, the legality of codification of internationally imposed policies and procedures. Six, the legality of forcing health measures upon individuals, interfering thereby in contracts with their health professionals and governments. Seven, the validity of identical interventions for all individuals under the misapplied, disingenuous term equity. These are likewise the false premises of the fifth draft. This secretive, irrational draft process is very harmful corporate house of cards. The frankly ridiculous definition of infodemic lowers the authoring group to a non-professional status of persuasion and imposition and reveals an intention to censor science. This draft activity must be stopped on the basis of its intention to produce man-made epidemics and use them for totalitarian and tortuous control over human and animal bodies toward the establishment of the so-called Internet of Bodies, the IOB, the most horrifying of enslavements ever to be imposed upon humans. The IOB captures each individual by means of multiple internal and external internet nodes for total surveillance and control, with potential for the inducement of pain, disease, and death. Please read the William and Mary College Law Review's paper on the illegalities of the Internet of Bodies. The U.S. must immediately withdraw from and defund the WHO. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Arnold Gore from No Organization Given, followed by Cassandra from Global Walkout USA, followed by Cheryl Ospinleader from No Organization Given.
Okay. I'm Arnold Gore, a consumer health advocate. The World Health Organization track record on handling the COVID-19 pandemic has been terrible. The exclusive focus on fast tracking the experimental COVID-19 vaccines and subsequent coercive measures implemented underlies the importance of maintaining national sovereignty. The World Health Organization should remain an advisory technical agency. An increased excess death rate has been reported by all of the advanced industrialized countries that have had a high percentage of uptake of the COVID vaccine. The only lesson learned from this record of performance by the WHO policymakers is that the transmission and implementation of its shoddy recommendations is to enforce compliance early enough to make sure there is even less opportunity for countervailing medical and scientific experts to disseminate their views, hopefully before damaging and irreversible measures are taken. The World Health Organization and the FDA should be emphasizing informed consent. Public health has been taken over by the pharmaceutical industry, and the World Health Organization should not be funded by people who are trying to use it as a lobbying force for an interested pharmaceutical industry. We should be emphasizing increased sanitation facilities throughout the world and increasing pure water. People need, that is the basic reason why people get these diseases in the poor countries who did much better than the more industrialized countries in the last pandemic.
Thank you, Arnold. We really appreciate your comments. Please submit any additional comments via the email that you RSVP to. Next, I have Cassandra from Global Walkout USA, followed by Cheryl with no organization given, followed by Abdil Leroy with no organization given.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Auerbach, and I'm speaking on behalf of the United States members of Global Walkout, about 18,000 individuals. I don't know why I'm not I'm up here in the corner. I'm not on a broad screen. Is that your intention?
Cassandra, we have not changed anything. Please continue to, we can hear you and we can see you.
Okay. All right. I'm speaking on behalf of the United States members of Global Walkout, which is about 18,000 individuals. We've looked at the data and conclude that the United States government is no longer designed and working for all the people. In fact, the U.S. Constitution has been corrupted and largely destroyed. The HHS itself is an example of an unconstitutional executive organization, as health is not among the enumerated powers given to the federal government by the Constitution. Intergovernmental authority over health resides in the states, localities, and individuals. What we've experienced in the last 3 years is tyranny, whose leaders have the often stated objective of wiping out the vast majority of the human population. It is engaged in biowarfare against persons and their ability to reproduce. The shots were contracted as a COVID countermeasure by the Department of Defense and were never a health care product. This leaves none of the tests of a health product, but their toxic contents and results definitely qualify them as biological weapons. The WHO's recommendations in response to the COVID infectious disease was worse than a disaster. The idea of giving more power and authority to this international body of unaccountable bureaucrats and profit-driven individuals who seem to believe in the destruction of all personal liberty, resulting in millions of deaths, is abhorrent on its face. What we have before us is a framework convention, probably titled that in an attempt to circumvent the duty of the United States Senate to review any treaty and vote on it. A framework convention is a legally binding international agreement which establishes broader commitments for its parties and leaves the settling of specific targets to subsequent, more detailed agreements These would be worked out in a conference of the parties. It shifts the lawmaking power from the individual nations or even laws that are mutually agreed upon to another group of unknown persons that cannot be communicated with by citizens. What we have observed is the repression of individuals and groups who had workable and effective treatments for COVID. Bounties were paid and extortion was engaged upon to force compliance. Clearly, illegal censorship was directed and paid for by the US government. This document seeks to give authority to engage in these
continue
behaviors
to put them in via written through the email that you RSVP through. Thank you. Next, I show Cheryl Aspenleader with no organization given, followed by Abdil Leroy with no organization given, followed by Chris Page with no organization given. As I don't see Chris on the line, the next person will be Ed Marsh with no organization given.
Okay, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Cheryl Aspenleiter, and I am here today as a citizen and a grandmother and a mother and a sister. And I am talking regarding Article 30, withdrawal. It looks like it takes 3 years to get out of this. It shouldn't take any more than 30 days. And we should withdraw from this right now. And I am here to accuse the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and the people who rolled out this vaccine of murdering my brother who took the J&J vaccine that had to be pulled for deaths. And he has now come down with turbo cancer and is dying. We need to pull out of this because how in the world can anyone expect to force this on a population that knows nothing about it at all? No one knows. 95% of the American public has no clue about the World Health Organization, let alone these treaties. You cannot force something upon a public that doesn't know about it. This is unconstitutional, and this is wrong, and you better stop it, because this is why they had a Nuremberg trial, and we'll do it again. You're murdering my family. This is the third family member now that is dead from these so-called vaccines that are bioweapons. You're murdering my big brother right now, and you better stop it. That's all I have to say.
I'm sorry about the death of your brother, and thank you for your comments. Next, I show that Abdil Leroy, and then I show, let me just make sure, I had Chris Page, who is not yet on the screen. So Ed Marsh will be followed by Gerald Wayne Smith Jr.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
A day is coming, and coming soon, when each of you in HHS, whether present at this meeting or not, will hear pronouncement from the throne of God. Away from me, you evildoers, I never knew you. Even now, the light of Christ enters HHS, so that the evils you have done and the evils you intend shall have no hiding place. For even now, the blood of medically murdered men, women, and children calls out to heaven. Do not suppose the Holy One is deaf to their cries. You are, each one of you, murderers, torturers, and traitors to the nation, who, in service to your medical deities, kill children in the cradle, kill children at the breast, kill children in the womb. That is the agenda you have signed up for, and for which each of you are trying to sign up the United States of America. Well, we're not joining you. We do not consent. And without our consent, your pieces of paper are not worth the air they're written on. The very fact that you are still intending to negotiate with terrorists, which is what the WHO are, even after we, who have authority over you, have commanded you to divorce the WHO, is witness to your crimes against humanity, crimes against mankind, and crimes against the Son of Man, Christ, whom you have mocked. Though it is not for me to say who will descend to hell, despised of God and mankind, I am authorized to decree thus: your overthrow and downfall are declared in heaven and now effected on earth. Amen, amen, amen.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker will be Chris. Chris Page again is not on the screen. So the next speaker will be Ed Marsh with no organization given, followed by Gerald Wayne Smith Jr. with no organization given. I didn't see Diane Waller, and so the next person after that is Stephen Ferry.
I am Ed Marsh from New Jersey. I'm speaking for myself on the Bureau Text Pandemic Treaty or Accord, which I oppose. This is because Article 34 gives authority to create protocols to a group of unknown, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats at the WHO. This allows them to do anything and would cede our national sovereignty to the WHO. There is no reason to cede our sovereignty to the WHO. Article 19, Sections 1C and 3B create funding sources, including from the private sector and pandemic-related product manufacturers. This represents a conflict of interest. There's no reason to support these conflicts of interest. The pandemic treaty is a threat to our national sovereignty, personal, medical, and health freedoms, and our and my right to bodily autonomy, and the right to say no. To say no. The World Health Organization is plagued by conflicts of interest. The pandemic treaty and the amendments to the IHR could pave the way for additional censorship, fraudulent use of the PCR test, unscientific health emergencies and scams, lockdowns, dangerous protocols, deadly, dangerous, experimental, untested injections that they call vaccines, and mandates, health passports, and surveillance. I urge you to reject the treaty and to exit the WHO. I also commend James Roguski for his efforts in alerting and informing me and the world of the dangerous treaty and amendments to the IHR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Gerald Wayne Smith Jr., followed by Diane Waller, who I didn't see on the line, followed by Stephen Ferry from Defending Humanity, followed by Rachel Chaput from No Organization Given.
I thank all of you for this opportunity. IHRs and the pandemic treaty are the infrastructure documents for power over, profits from, and control of common people who are deemed useless eaters now that automation and artificial intelligence have made labor pools expendable in the minds of elites. Article 34, protocols to the Bureau of Text, promises a wild, wild west of mandatory medical protocol. The WHO concept of One Health promises to bring the genomic, ecological, all-cause mortality, and health catastrophes of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns to all plants, animals, and ecosystems, along with worldwide top-down control of food supplies. Even domestic farm animals and personal pets will be swept up into this folly based on the understanding of immune function from the 1950s rather than system science from the early 2000s. Ungodly lust for power and profits have made the use of nuclear weapons thinkable, and going under the skin into the bodies of others a giddy necessity in the minds of elites like Klaus Schwab and Yuval Harari. May never again, truly never again, be the right men and women of history. No sweeping powers to a tyrannical technocracy. No adoption of IHR changes. Totally reject the Bureau of Text in all pandemic treaty iterations. Restore the Nuremberg Code. Exit the WHO. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Stephen Ferry from Defending Humanity, followed by Rachel Chapo with no organization given. I then showed Jeffrey Gordon with Marked by COVID. I didn't see Jeffrey on the link. Then Joanne Gorlick. I didn't see Joanne on the link. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to Jim Bain after that. Stephen?
Thank you. Defending Humanity is an organization that seeks to retain and forward the 30 human rights promulgated by the UN since 1948, and most recently, unfortunately, annulled completely by the very same UN in supporting the WHO's pandemic responses. While the perspicacious viewpoints being expressed so far have focused on the policies being discussed, my focus is on the purposes that drive those policies. Good policies are certainly needed for real problems, but unworkable policies with bad outcomes designed to resolve non-existent problems just create new problems and call into question motives. We never had a pandemic, but we do have a real disaster of huge proportions from vaccine injuries and deaths that is not only being ignored, but even institutionalized by these WHO proposals, which makes these discussions beyond bizarre. My concern is that humanity is on the verge of extinction, not because of some natural catastrophe, real or imagined, or AI running amok, but because of the ascendancy of an elitist clique that has succeeded in forwarding internationally its own logically flawed opinions and purposes regarding humanity being the cause of all the ills the world faces, and their solution being wiping out all but a few of us through a variety of programs, and including organizations such as the WHO, which, it has to be said, failed miserably in addressing the last pandemic and is now to be rewarded with complete control over humanity to repeat their earlier failure, in violation of common sense, good practice, business practice, and all civil and human rights, which again calls into question the purposes driving this revision of policies. Whereas, if we are to acknowledge the reality, the ills we face in the world have been the result of suppression by those with destruction and self-benefit as their guiding purpose, of the solutions offered by the brighter and more constructive and ethical minds in history. The elitist funding and directing the organizations executing these illogical programs violate 24 immutable laws of life that guarantee their eventual failure, just as 300 civilizations have come and gone in recorded history under the direction of similar individuals, except that now the eventual collapse will be worldwide, not regional. My message to these elitists and those persuaded to support them is to realize that you can escape the prison you're building for yourselves for what seem to be right now the very best of reasons. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Please send additional comments via the mailbox that you RSVP'd. Next, I show Rachel Chapeau, followed by Jim Robert Bain, followed by Kristen Glover. Rachel?
It's Chaput. First of all, I want to express my love and gratitude to all of the individuals in this meeting who are protesting the frightening attempted power grab by the World Health Organization. Your courage and resistance is brave and beautiful, and it gives me strength. I would like to be reassured by the language prefacing this meeting and also the meeting last week about how state sovereignty and independence is not being threatened. However, removal of sovereignty and state independence is explicitly described in both the international health regulations discussed last week and the Bureau's text being discussed today. The threat of centralized control through the WHO seems to be a very real and immediate threat, regardless of the reassurances provided. I'm a supporter of all efforts to remove the United States entirely from the World Health Organization. The documents being negotiated at this time aspire to transform the WHO into a terrorist organization with the power to control and oppress all the people of the world. The WHO has proven its ineptitude and lack of compassion clearly throughout the entire COVID pandemic. Through the recommendations of the WHO, the people of most developed nations were lied to, terrorized, and coerced into dangerous social and medical practices. The WHO has proven its inability to learn from its mistakes and its unwillingness to listen to its critics. The Bureau's text confirms to anyone who's paying attention the malevolent intent behind what might otherwise be taken to be simply incompetence or failed policies.
Lockdowns were unnecessary and destructive. Masks have much more negative impact than positive. The COVID vaccines are a dangerous travesty. Vaccine mandates destroy human rights. The surveillance and suppression of free speech proposed by the WHO threatens democracy and quality of life. I reject the false authority of the WHO and its deceitful actions. All nations who want to preserve freedom should withdraw from the WHO at once. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for pronouncing your last name incorrectly. Next, I have Jim Vane with no organization given, followed by Kristen Glover from the National Executive Board of IATSE Local 600, followed by Monique Lukens from California Educators for Medical Freedom.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, 2 minutes here. This is basically a Nuremberg Code violation on informed consent. No, the insert really is blank. Most didn't know anything about going on a website. The public was also lied to about the Comirnaty shot, which was approved but not available for use. What does that mean? The shot's still in phase 4 trials. Completion date estimated March 24th per clinical 2024 per clinicaltrials.gov. How does that comport with the Nuremberg Code, where we are not supposed to be, we're supposed to have informed consent? Or how does that comport with Unit 731 in Japan that did experimentation in World War II on unwilling Chinese? The founder of the PCR test, Nobel Prize winner Kary Mullis, said on public record that the PCR test should never be used for COVID, and explicitly said the test misrepresented the numbers actually with the virus, setting it to 40 or even 45, as the WHO set it to, results in a lot of false positives. And this per Clinical Infectious Diseases, September 28th, 2020. So that's an issue there. We tried an mRNA vax with SARS pandemic about 15 years ago. They gave the shot to the test animals. Upon re-exposure to another coronavirus, all the test animals died. We know this. The CDC said on January 19th, 2022, that if you had COVID, natural immunity is equal to or superior to the shot. And we're ignoring that as well. So that's my 2 minutes, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Kristen Glover from National Executive Board of IATSE Local 600, followed by Monique from the California Educators for Medical Freedom. Following, I showed Susan Cleary, but I don't show them on the line. So the next person would be Christina Fires. Kristen?
Hi, this is Kristen Glover. Thank you for the opportunity. I am an elected member of the National Executive Board of IATSE Local 600 Cinematographers and Publicists Union. However, I speak only for myself and members who elected me. I am a health freedom activist. I speak on behalf of all human beings on our beautiful God-given planet. I speak to advocate for individual bodily sovereignty for all human beings. I speak to advocate for national sovereignty for all nations. The only people who seem to want one world health or one world order are the unelected elites who run the WEF, the WHO, etc. These people seem to be narcissistic sociopaths who want to control their fellow humans for their own selfish profit. We must exit the WHO. The WHO should be abolished. And as a note, we know from Event 201 that the COVID pandemic was a plandemic. I hope that Neil Amvora and Christina Franklin will check out that event and understand that it was planned and that it was a bioweapon and that the shots are bioweapons. I hope that both of you will wake up to the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I show Monique from California Educators for Medical Freedom, followed by Christina Fires with no organization given, followed by Tamara Pearson with no organization given. Minnie, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you so much. Start my time now. My name is Monique Lukens. I'm speaking for myself, but I am a member of the California Educators for Medical Freedom, and I'm involved with a lot of lawsuits. I hope that many of you are, because this is the way that we can stand up for ourselves. One of the lawsuits, actually, California Educators for Medical Freedom was not involved, but a nonprofit that we are involved with, they took the masks away from the airplanes. They went to court in Florida, and that's what was done. So we needed to do that in order to have a right to breathe. Even though Dr. Fauci clearly said, oh, you don't need masks, he went back and forth. Infodemic, interesting. Thanks to James Roguski for pointing that out, and another person on here. Yeah, I know that you can have too much information and get confused, but did we have the right information? Because apparently people still think it's a pandemic, and it wasn't even a 1% of people that passed away. Anybody passing away is bad, but it wasn't a pandemic. It was a plandemic. How was it planned? Well, WHO, thanks to Romola D, an independent journalist, she came out in July of 2020, and she talked about 194 unelected world leaders, and they agreed upon the release of a lethal respiratory pathogen in a 2005 exercise. Okay, I'm going to show you the pamphlet, and this was on YouTube. It garnered about, oh, I don't think you could see it. Well, I will read it. It says, International Health Regulations, A World at Risk, Annual Report on Global Preparedness for Health Emergencies, Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. That was you. Okay, and so you wanted to do an exercise. It was signed off, and I find it highly suspicious that former Secretary of State under President Trump, Mike Pompeo, went on stage on TV and said, we are in a live exercise here.
Thank you for your comments. Please submit any additional comments via the email that you RSVP'd. Next, I show Christina Fires, followed by Tamara Pearson, followed by Stan Latta.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Christina Fears, and just before I go into my statement, I just wanted to add a little bit of reference point. In 2021, when the vaccines were released, I was in the process of protecting my fertility. I'm in my 40s, and there was the information coming out from the World Health Organization and from the CDC was that the vaccine was safe and effective for pregnant women. And then later in the summer, in June, Pfizer came forward and said that they were beginning the clinical trials for pregnant women. So that already really interfered with my ability to trust these organizations with my health. Now, you might lose me for a second while I grab the rest of my statement, and I know my time is ticking, so thank you. One, why have we signed a treaty that sacrifices our bodily sovereignty to unelected global bureaucrats? Why is the WHO asking for this global cooperation when they have done so little to win public trust following COVID 2020? It is now proven the virus was a result of a gain-of-function research. Why has the WHO done nothing to investigate this and prosecute all participants in this crime against humanity? Why has the WHO done nothing to investigate the claimed bioweapons research in the Ukraine made in March 2022 by Victoria Nuland? Why has there been absolutely no enforcement of the UN Bioweapons Moratorium, UNODA, that was first introduced in 1980? For these reasons, it is completely unfathomable why any leader of sound mind and body would entrust any enforceable power over our constitutional rights. It is often forgotten power reverts to the state's jurisdiction. Any power not expressly written in the Constitution. How does the president have the authority to sign such a declaration? Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Christina. The next person is Tamara Pearson, followed by Stan Latta. That is the end of the list that we went through, but I know Katarina Lindley joined late, so we will have Katarina go last. So Tamara.
Good afternoon. I'm Tamara Pearson. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well as HAPN, HAPPN, Humanitarian Americans for a Peaceful, Prosperous Planet Now. Upon our review of the draft Bureau text, as well as knowing now that the COVID-19 pandemic was a man-made virus, we see it is easy to see that the proposed pandemic treaty is an attack on the sovereignty of nations and an attempt to transfer power and wealth, as well as to plan future profitable pandemics, if you want to call it a pandemic or a pandemic. It is our position that we must instruct and direct our U.S. representatives to withdraw participation in the World Health Organization in its entirety, including defunding, etc., which necessarily includes no participation in any pandemic treaty or any other international health treaties, declarations, commitments, partnerships, or agreements that would render the U.S. Constitution or any civil rights secured thereby void at any time under any condition or circumstance, including a global health emergency. We deem participation in the World Health Organization, and as well as any amendment to any international health regulations, participations in any vaccination passports, digital passports, etc., the World Health Organization in general, a threat to our life and our liberty, as well as our prosperity as a nation for now and in the future. We also understand the democratic nature of these listening sessions, but it's disturbing that they are necessary, as it should be obvious of that what we're involved with in dealing with. Again, the natural world is not a problem. It is human corruption that is the problem. As a nation, we have fought too hard for our liberty to give it away to anyone. We are not relinquishing control to anyone, including any organization, including the World Health Organization. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Please submit any additional comments.
I will. Thank you.
Next, I have Stan Latta, followed by Katarina Lindley.
I'm Reverend Dr. Stan Latta. While I'm a volunteer with the Red Cross and a Southern Baptist minister, I speak for myself as a Christian and a proud American citizen. I asked to speak today regarding governance and to express my public comments on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. For the last 3 years, our world has become woke. We have focused on fear-mongering. We have done egregious enforcement. We have condemned anyone with a contrary view to a criminal status. Our United States Constitution is one of enumerated specific powers. In our country, states' rights are paramount, and the people are the power center and rulers in America. True Americans and self-reliant citizens of the world are and should be in charge of and responsible for their own health and health decisions. With that said, the only true governance in creation is the author of creation. We should not give up our God-given rights to anyone. When we fulfill his divine mandate, only then will real healing, health, and wholeness return to his world. We don't need the UN or the WHO, not a health certificate or purported vaccine or cure. None of these will save us. We need salvation in Jesus Christ.
Thank you for your comments. Next, I have Katarina Lindley.
Thank you for allowing me to speak despite being late. So even though the World Health Organization failed miserably in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic during these past 3 years, the CA Plus draft as is would dramatically expand its authority to declare another pandemic and as such expand an international bureaucracy for health emergencies with an additional annual budget estimated by the World Bank at 3 times WHO current budget. The nation members shall raise financial resources to implement the treaty and commit not less than 5% of national health budgets to be devoted to the health emergencies. Under Article 18, the treaty calls on the parties to tackle false, misleading, misinformation, or disinformation, thus forming its own version of Ministry of Truth. Debate in science is essential for science to advance. The language of One Health agenda sounds reasonable, but is extremely problematic. One Health, as written, includes not only human health, but also the health of animals, agricultural plants, and the environment. Through the concept of One Health, WHO would have control over every aspect of existence on Earth. They would not need to prioritize human health, but rather they could choose to balance human health with animal and plant health, as well as environmental health under the guise of climate change. Previously encouraged recommendations by WHO will now become mandatory obligations to be followed by all member nations. Also, WHO will be able to, on basis of perceived emergency, implement travel restrictions via global health digital passports, border closures, mandate certain lockdown measures such as masking, vaccinations, approved diagnostic tools, and treatments, all in the name of pandemic preparedness under One Health, One World. And as such, this will interfere with fundamental patient-physician relationship. I do ask for HHS to defund WHO or exit WHO because these new measures would not help the American citizens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was the last speaker within the listening session. I'm going to turn to Ambassador Hamamoto to see if she would like to say anything.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to thank you again for your feedback and taking time today to speak with us. And as Jessica said, we do encourage you to submit any additional comments, written comments through the email option, and we will make sure that we review those. So thank you very much.
Thank you. As Ambassador noted, thank you to our panelists for participating and taking into consideration any feedback provided by our speakers today and through written comments, which will be accepted until July 7th at oga.rsvp@hhs.gov. Again, that's oga.rsvp@hhs.gov. This is the same email address that you RSVP to. Comments may cover as many topics as you would like, and you do not have a page limit. We look forward to reviewing any additional input. Please note, we do not respond on the input that you have provided. As the ambassador noted, there will be other opportunities for engagement, including to provide formal feedback throughout the year. If we host additional listening sessions, those will be posted in the Federal Register. Again, we want to thank everyone that has provided feedback today and those that remained interested and thus are in listening mode. This concludes today's listening session.